I'm Carol Emarthle-Douglas. I'm Northern Arapaho and Seminole, originally from Oklahoma. My mother is Northern Arapaho from the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming, and my dad is Seminole from the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma. I've been weaving for almost 20 years now, and I do what I call traditional contemporary coiling basket weaving. The traditional is the coiling of the basket, the technique, and the contemporary is the materials that I use to make the baskets. I use wax linen thread, I use round reed and raffia. I experiment with a lot of different coiling materials. In basketry, I use the twining, plaiting, coiling technique, and some of the miniatures I have done, I use different materials. I have used hickory splints, brown ash, red cedar, yellow cedar bark, the cedar roots, bear grass. This is bear grass from Washington State. And this is bear grass from Arizona. I use yucca, pine needles, birch bark, and recently learned how to use lahala, which is from Hawaii. My family was very untraditional. My mother was raised in St. Stephen's Mission in Wyoming, so they weren't taught any of their traditions at all. And my father also went to boarding school in Oklahoma, so they were discouraged from learning or speaking their language or learning anything about their history. So I've been just learning on my own over the years and just trying to catch up with, some of the traditions of both tribes, and so I've done a lot of research on my own. So this one is one of my miniatures, and it is coiled, and this is the coiling technique I use. And the materials I use for the coiling of these baskets are a round reed core, which is the smallest round reed that you can find. It's like a size 00. So this is what I use, which is the inside core of the basket. According to the design, I use raffia, which is a palm fiber, and this is the material that I use to coil around the core of the miniatures. So with these, according to the design and the colors that I use other colors of raffia. What I do is I'll take the raffia and then I'll split it down. I'll split it down maybe 3 or 4 times so I can get it to fit inside of a beading needle. And that's how I start coiling with this material. So the Basket Weavers Association meets once a year in October, and they are carrying on the traditional basket weaving techniques of the Northwest. And so they have people from Washington, Idaho, Oregon, and sometimes Alaska. So all the weavers get together, and then they trade material and they trade techniques, and we can just we can take classes from each other. Well, I originally started with coiling, and I learned coiling at the basketry school in Seattle. When I first moved there, I didn't really know a lot of the native people in the area, so I found out they had a basketry school in downtown Seattle. So I took a basketry class, and the first technique I learned was the twining with the cedar, and I enjoyed that. And then there was another class that they were advertising for coiling, And then, so I kind of just started doing really simple geometric designs in the beginning, really, you know, real simple. I should never say simple because it's really not. So I did coiling, geometric designs, and then later on I started experimenting with more like pictorial designs. I started doing like horses. I did one with buffalo. So more like ledger art type designs, and then also the Seminole designs, also some of the patchwork designs. So that's from both of my tribes. Yeah, it's called Cultural Burdens, and it's based on the story of women that in the past carried burden baskets. And so I made 11 burden baskets for each woman from each tribe. And so they're all miniatures, and I tried to stay true to the materials that I used according to the tribe that I picked, and then according to the materials that they used. So it's a tribute to the women of each tribe that was, you know, in charge of taking care of kids or carrying firewood or carrying food. So that's why it was called Cultural Burdens. My primary coiling materials that I use for my big my wax linen baskets, my coiled wax linen baskets, is a hemp core, which is this material. It's a purchase material. And also I use wax linen thread, and then I use a tapestry needle. So what I do with the coiling, it's called a figure 8 stitch. So this is like the bottom of the basket. Start the coil, and then you stitch. You wrap it 3 times, and then you stitch a figure 8 stitch. So for this, I would alternate. I would stop and then switch colors, on and on until I get to the top and start shaping the basket. So once I reach to where my design is going to be, I'll get all my colors all lined up and all my material. So I'll have every, you know, when it comes time to switch the design, I'll have the correct color to change. So a basket this size can be maybe take a couple of months to make. And with this size basket, it takes me 8 hours to get around one time. Now I'm going to be attaching the miniatures, and there are 11 different tribes represented. So each tribe has a different style of basketry. And the materials I showed earlier are some of the materials that are used for the miniatures. I have the birch bark basket. This will be it's called an open weave, and this is the red and yellow cedar bark. And these baskets are all burden baskets. I chose them because they're different throughout the United States, and then the burden baskets that each tribe carried. So this is from the northwest area. This would be from like Alaska. This is a red and yellow cedar bark. This style is from Canada and has a little bit more design than the others. So once I complete all the baskets, I'll attach each one, and each lady gets one on the inside and on the outside. Oh, it's been great. Yeah, it's great to have such a big space to work in. I've never had that much room to do my work, and the people here have just been so nice and accommodating. I've even had the chance to go see. I've seen their collection of baskets. They have a nice collection. Looked at the pottery, and I like to look at the pottery just to get an idea of different shapes, maybe of baskets that I could probably try. And then I've seen a couple of other museums and had the chance to see a couple of other collections also. With the miniatures, I'll do like animal design, frog designs. This is the whale design, since I live in the Northwest. And the top is a wave pattern that's they use a lot in the basketry up there. So these are my idea. This is called a round dance, because the figures are in their regalia and they're dancing at a powwow, so everybody is holding hands. So this one is one of my smaller coiled baskets, and it has a lid. And it's a whole other thing when you make a lid for a coiled basket, because you have to make sure it fits properly and it's not too loose or too tight. I try not to do too many of the same type of baskets. So this one it's a coiled basket, traditionally coiled, but what I'm going to do is do beadwork over it. And I just got an inspiration from some of the people that are the Great Basin area, the Paiute tribe. I think some of the Nevada tribes who are known for doing the beadwork over the baskets. So I'm going to try it and use my own designs. For my project here, what I would attempt to do is to do beadwork on a basket. So what I think I might do is bead this basket, and then also this one, figure out my colors and my design. But the idea, of course, when you do a beaded basket is you have to cover it from the top to the bottom, so it'll be totally covered with beads. And then also I'll have the lid to cover too. So these are my beads. So these are the colors that I'll be working with, or some of the colors. I had like about this much covered, and then I looked at it and I didn't like the way it looked because the beads weren't all uniform and I could see some, like gaps in it. So I took the scissors and cut it. So far I enjoy it. I started a basket, like I did one basket before as, just as when I was learning from a weaver, and it seemed to go pretty well, so now I'm going to just take it to another level and try maybe a little bit more difficult design. So this is one of the miniatures I'm working on, and it's going to be a burden basket, and so I'm having to make 2 of each. So this is the twining technique, which is a different technique I use when when I'm doing that, finishing that big piece there. So this is the finished one. And this is the second piece. So I'm going to continue now with a couple of rows of this natural color. And again, I'm using the reed in a different way. This is, instead of coiling with it, I'm twining with it. So holding it with one hand and then just kind of controlling it with this, keeping the tightness on it. Then I'll use my awl to push everything up. So this is the basic twining technique. And I'm doing this. I guess this might look odd to some weavers because they work this way upside down. I mean, no, not upside down, this way. But since I'm from the Northwest and my husband is Haida, and I guess I learned from the Haida weavers that they work the opposite way. So I just got used to that. Just got used to that feeling of working, I guess, what other people would think is upside down. So I'm going to do 2 rows of this color, no, 3 rows. And then I want it to start coming up. Once I get past doing 2 more of these rows, I'll want it to start opening up some more. So I'll have to add some more of this later. I'll add some more reed to make it wider. When I do my coiled miniature pieces, and then it has a lot of if there's a lot of design to it, then I really have to concentrate on stopping and starting with the different colored material. A lot of weavers, they'll look at they'll look for shapes when you're doing twining. So like this, since it's a miniature, like you have a bottle this size, or even this little needle case. So you can kind of just look around and see what shape you want to make something, and then you can twine around it. Okay, so now I'm doing a miniature coiled basket, and it's kind of a Seminole style. They still do coiled baskets with, you know, a different material, but today I'm using a pine needle, and since it's a miniature, I'm just using one pine needle right now. But I'm doing a stitch that's called an open stitch, which means that as I'm coiling and stitching, I'm not covering the entire core like you would with, you know, just a single stitch in coiling. So each stitch I'm doing is just going into the previous row, and it gives that little open effect where you can actually see the stitches. So this is the beginning of the stitch, so it's not all covered. So what I'm using is, I said I was using one pine needle to coil as the core, and then I'm using a thread. It's a small, what you use for beading, and it comes in different colors. So I'm going to be using these colors just to add some color to this basket. So what I'm going to do is cut this part, taper it, but I have my other piece ready. And it's still wet. So I'm adding this another piece of the pine needle. I'm just going to hide it behind here, and then and then it'll be sewn in. I've been here every year. Every day, you know, you have to be juried in to get into the market. So I've been lucky enough to get in since 2000. I think it was 2000 or 2001. So every year that I'm, you know, have the opportunity to be here, I'll be here every year. So, and I think this is one of the shows where people bring their best work. I'm doing they call either the peyote stitch, or it's also called a brick stitch. And I add one bead one by one here, so it's going to take a while. But this is the type of beading they do on the baskets. So it's not directly onto the basket. It's just like a net that covers it. So as it covers the basket, it'll, you know, you add more beads, so it'll fit tighter, and you want it to, you know, make sure it's nice and tight on the basket so it doesn't slip. So I'm going to use 4 different colors, and I've got a design sort of picked out, but I'm not sure exactly. I just want to see how this goes first, and then make sure I have a good foundation for it. I said you don't see them throughout all of the United States either, mostly in the like Nevada, Utah area. I know this is going to be time consuming. I think that because I wasn't raised really traditionally, I kind of just don't feel like I'm bound by, you know, certain traditions, what you can do and what you can't, what's not proper to do. So I just kind of experiment with whatever, you know, whatever I kind of want to do. So I think that's given me a little bit more freedom to, you know, I wouldn't say I borrow, but I just kind of, I'm inspired by different tribes.